The icy air of the October morning in Redwood National Park, California, cut Laura's face. A 28-year-old professional cyclist, known for her iron discipline and a gaze that always sought the horizon. Her blonde hair, tied in a tight ponytail, barely moved with the light breeze that heralded the dawn. At the starting point of a high-speed course through the mountains, a vision froze her blood. The front tire of her bicycle exploded, launching her off the trail towards an abyss. The scream she couldn't utter echoed in her mind, a chilling premonition. The scent of pine and damp earth filled the air as Laura, still pale from the premonition, forced herself to focus. The morning mist began to dissipate, revealing the grandeur of the sequoias that stood like silent sentinels. However, the intensity of that vision was different. She closed her eyes for a moment, deeply inhaling the pure forest air, an air that, paradoxically, seemed charged with an invisible threat. She touched them, checking the pressure with a digital gauge, looking for any imperfection in the rubber. Her eyes scanned every millimeter, seeking the slightest sign of wear, a shard of glass, a minuscule crack, anything. Nothing. They seemed perfect, new, robust. But the image of the tire disintegrating into 1,000 pieces was so real that she couldn't ignore it. The sound of the rubber tearing, the asphalt approaching. When she opened them, her attention fell on her bicycle, a state-of-the-art carbon fiber machine, impeccably maintained. It was her working instrument, her passion, her extension. Every part, every screw was routinely checked by herself, with an almost obsessive precision, the result of years of dedication to the sport. But the premonition had planted a seed of doubt, a seed that now blossomed into panic. She felt cold sweat trickle down her back, even with the low California autumn temperature. "It's just nerves," she muttered to herself, trying to shake off the vivid image of the tire bursting. The scene seemed so real, the impact, the sensation of falling, the cutting wind. Her fingers trembled slightly as she adjusted her helmet. The premonition was not just a static image. It was a visceral experience, with the sharp sound of air escaping the tire and the feeling of imminent despair. She could feel the handlebars spinning uncontrollably in her hands, the rubber tearing at the asphalt, the smell of burning tire invading her nostrils. Laura, an athlete at the peak of her form, with defined muscles and sharp reflexes, was not one to be shaken by mere fantasies. "I need to check this again," she said to herself, her voice almost inaudible, a whisper against the vast silence of the forest. She began a meticulous inspection, far beyond the usual, almost feverish. First the tires. Then an idea came to her, a drastic decision, but one that seemed the only way to combat the inevitable. "I won't risk it," she thought, the voice of reason overriding the fear. With a decisive sigh, she took a pair of spare tires, still in their original packaging, and began to change them. The soft sound of friction was music to her ears. She spun the wheels, listening to the smooth sound of the bearings, free of any friction, a sound of mechanical perfection. The pedals, the handlebars, the chain, everything was inspected with the utmost care, with the attention of a surgeon. She even readjusted the saddle height, although she knew it was perfect. The instinct for self-preservation was strong, and the premonition had amplified each of her senses, transforming her into a surveillance machine. It was a time-consuming process, requiring patience and precision, but the urgency in her chest drove her. The metallic sound of the tools, the creaking of the rubber being removed, echoed softly in the quiet of the forest, which seemed to observe her every move. The aroma of the coffee she had drunk earlier, mixed with the smell of earth and dew, seemed a sweet irony in the face of the tension that enveloped her. Laura, usually so focused on performance, on speed, on adrenaline, was now trapped in a silent battle against fate. She was not superstitious by nature, but the clarity of that vision deeply disturbed her, like a nightmare that refuses to go away. The trail ahead, winding and challenging, now seemed like a path full of invisible dangers, each curve a potential trap. She didn't just want to survive. She wanted to defy the inevitable, to prove that she was the master of her own destiny. Each movement was deliberate, precise, almost a ritual of protection. She felt a pang of relief as she saw the new tires, robust, firmly in place. The smell of new rubber was an aroma of safety. Now yes, she thought, a small dose of confidence returning, although still fragile. Next, Laura checked the brakes, squeezing the levers repeatedly, watching the pads grip the rim firmly. The cold morning breeze gave way to a timid sun that began to pierce the treetops, creating patterns of light and shadow on the forest floor. The descent began, and the wind whistled in her ears like a chorus of ghostly voices, while Laura, despite her competitive nature, maintained a considerably lower speed than usual. The sharp curves that normally made her smile with excitement, a challenge to be overcome, were now approached with redoubled caution, almost with reverence. And steep slopes on the left, a scene of stunning beauty that at that moment seemed more like a trap. With each meter traveled, a new wave of relief washed over her, but it was a tenuous relief. A breath of fresh air before a new wave, accompanied by an increasing tension that squeezed her chest. She could feel her heart beating faster, not from physical exertion. Like a mysterious veil seemed to watch her, a silent witness to her internal struggle. The chirping of birds, once a relaxing and cheerful melody, now sounded distant, almost unreal, like a lament. Laura felt her throat dry, her mouth with a metallic taste. She didn't stop, continuing to pedal, but her speed decreased even further. Each pedal stroke an act of defiance. She gripped the handlebars even tighter, as if the bicycle itself could protect her from an invisible danger. With each kilometer that passed, she counted mentally, hoping that the course would end soon, so she could escape this waking nightmare. The tension was almost palpable, an unwanted companion on her journey, a shadow that followed her closely. But from anxiety, from the fear that fate, cunning and relentless, would find another way to manifest itself. The premonition had been so specific about the tire, but the terror that death lurked in every shadow was a heavy burden. The smell of burnt rubber from passing cars, mixed with the aroma of wet grass and freshly turned earth, lingered in the air, a strange mix of civilization and wilderness. Her eyes, always scanning the road, searched for any anomaly. A loose stone, a pothole, a crack in the asphalt, anything that could replicate the catastrophe she had glimpsed. The driver of a truck going up the mountain honked at her, a thunderous sound that made her jump slightly, but she quickly regained her composure, her focus unwavering. The road snaked through the mountains, with cliffs on the right on a particularly sharp curve. A few meters from where her vision had led her to the abyss, a small rodent, a cheeky squirrel, suddenly darted across the road. Laura, with her sharp reflexes, acted instinctively, swerving sharply to the left. The front tire scraped the edge of the asphalt, almost losing its grip, a rough sound that made her hair stand on end. For a fraction of a second, panic took over. She felt the handlebars tremble violently in her hands, the bicycle shake beneath her, the weight of gravity pulling her down. The cold in her stomach, the sensation of falling, the memory of the premonition, all returned with full force, a whirlwind of terrifying sensations. But she managed to recover, straightening the bicycle with a concentrated effort, the muscles in her legs and arms burning. A deep sigh escaped her lips, a hoarse sound of relief. Her muscles were tense, her breathing ragged, sweat dripping down her face. Almost, she thought, the word a whisper of relief and terror, a constant reminder of the fragility of life. The redwood landscape with its towering trees that seemed to touch the sky and the fog that still lingered in some parts of the valley. The sun was already high, warming Laura's skin as she continued the course, a warmth that, paradoxically, could not dissipate the cold in her soul. The smell of dry grass and dust, kicked up by the wind, replaced the morning dew, a drier, heavier aroma. She had already covered most of the trail, and a sense of cautious optimism began to emerge, a ray of hope in the midst of darkness. The soft sound of the tires rolling on the asphalt was a balm to her ears, a melody of progress, and the wind, once an enemy, now seemed like an ally propelling her forward, as if nature itself was on her side. Suddenly, a sharp, metallic sound tore through the air, a sound that made her heart leap. "No, thank you. I'm fine," Lavra replied, forcing a smile, although her voice was still trembling, almost a whisper. She didn't want to admit the strange series of near accidents that had been following her, the feeling that she was being hunted by an invisible force. Lavra felt the bicycle chain come loose and tangle in the rear wheel, a sudden and unexpected movement. Lavra got back on the bicycle, testing the pedals, the brakes, every movement with caution. Everything seemed to work, but the sense of security had been shaken once again, replaced by constant vigilance. She slowed down even more, pedals turning slowly, as if she were treading on eggs, each movement calculated. With each descent, each curve, she felt a tightness in her chest, a premonition that the next danger was lurking. The beauty of the redwood landscape, with its ancient trees and the distant murmur of a stream, seemed an ironic contrast to the internal drama she was experiencing, an idyllic setting for a nightmare. Doubt persisted, gnawing at her soul. Would she be able to outwit fate until the end, or would it catch up to her somehow? The bicycle braked abruptly, and she was thrown forward, almost flying over the handlebars, a sensation of lightness and terror. For a moment, time seemed to stand still, the world in slow motion. The metal was hot to the touch, a heat that seemed to emanate from the danger itself. The smell of oil and hot tire lingered in the air, a mixture of grease and rubber. The sunlight, which had previously seemed comforting, now revealed every scratch on her knees, every sign of danger avoided, every scar of her battle. Lavra couldn't shake the feeling that fate was playing with her, offering small doses of terror, testing her resilience, her faith, her own sanity. The image of her body hitting the asphalt, the impact, the searing pain, the darkness. Her mind relived fragments of her premonition, not the tire, but the fall, the loss of control, the helplessness. Her heart pounded in her chest, hammering against the ribs. She managed, by an almost miraculous reflex, to put her feet on the ground, dragging them to avoid a complete fall, a rough sound of rubber against the asphalt. Her knees scraped on the asphalt, an immediate burning sensation, a pain that brought her back to reality. The bicycle lay crookedly, the chain hanging distortedly, a tangle of metal. Luck, or perhaps her tireless training and the muscle memory of years of cycling, had once again saved her from an imminent catastrophe. "Whew," she gasped, the air leaving her lungs in a sigh of relief mixed with dread, a sound lost in the wind. That was close. She knelt beside the bicycle, her hands trembling slightly as she tried to untangle the chain. A car passed, slowing down, and the driver waved, asking if she needed help. After a few minutes of effort, her fingers greasy, the chain was back in place. The last part of the course was a gradual climb, a test of endurance that Lavra normally faced with vigor and determination, with the promise of a glorious descent. However, the accumulated fatigue and constant tension had taken their toll, draining her energy. Lavra felt a slight imbalance, as if the bicycle were alive and fighting against her. The sound increased, becoming an irritating hiss, as if something was scraping, a sound that echoed in her premonition. Her heart leapt into her throat, a frantic drumming. It was smaller than her fingernail, but the threat it posed was gigantic, an abyss of possibilities. Lavra felt a wave of exhaustion wash over her, not just the physical tiredness of the ride, but the mental fatigue of constantly being on guard, of fighting against an invisible threat, of living in a state of constant alert. She did not know that the real trap still awaited her, hidden in the quiet of her home in a place where she least expected it. She looked at the top of the climb, which still seemed distant, a final obstacle to be overcome. The late afternoon light began to gild the treetops, creating long shadows on the road, shadows that seemed to hide new dangers. She blew the dust off the tire, checking again, as if fate could have implanted other hidden dangers, other invisible traps. Her fingers brushed the rubber, feeling the integrity of the tire she had changed that morning, a sense of security that, at that moment, seemed like a mirage. She stopped immediately, getting off the bicycle with a quick jump, her feet touching the ground with a dry thud. Her eyes fixed on the front wheel, searching for the source of the sound. Nothing seemed out of place, but the sound. With each kilometer she traveled, the feeling that she had cheated death became stronger, a victory to be savored, but still with a bitter taste. The fresh mountain air, once a promise of freedom and adventure, now seemed to have witnessed her struggle, guarding dark secrets. That hiss was frighteningly familiar to the noises that filled her premonition, an echo of disaster. The smell of wet earth, rising from the roots of the sequoias after the light drizzle of the previous night, was almost imperceptible to her, her senses dulled by fear. She knelt down, her breath caught in her throat, searching for the source of the noise with the attention of a detective. It took a few seconds, which seemed like an eternity, until her eyes spotted something tiny, almost invisible, embedded in the tread of the tire, a small shard of glass, glinting in the sunlight. It was so small that it would easily be missed in a less thorough inspection, an almost perfect trap. But there it was, a pinprick of fate, a vivid reminder of the fragility of life, of how danger can hide in the most insignificant things. Each pedal stroke felt heavier, her muscles burned in protest, but her mind was focused on only one thing: finishing, reaching the finish line of that endless day. She looked at the blue sky, searching for rain clouds that could add another obstacle. But the sun remained strong, although less intense than at noon, a sun that could not warm her soul. Suddenly, a strange buzzing began to emanate from the front wheel, a subtle sound, but one that made her whole body shiver. Lavra spun the wheel with her hand, a slow, careful movement. The hiss persisted, a metallic wail. "I don't believe it," she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief and relief, a mixture of conflicting emotions. Carefully, Lavra took a small screwdriver she carried in her tool bag and, with a precise and delicate movement, managed to remove the tiny fragment. The silence that followed the removal of the shard of glass was a welcome sound, a relief for her ears and her soul. She got back on the bicycle again, each pedal stroke feeling the weight of that battle against the invisible, against the fate that seemed determined to catch up with her. "Almost there," she murmured, feeling a metallic taste in her mouth, a mixture of fatigue and the tension of the day. Lavra finally reached the top of the last climb, her body trembling with exhaustion, but her spirit buoyed by a sense of triumph. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of orange and purple, a spectacle of colors that cast an ethereal light over the redwood landscape, transforming it into a painting of melancholic beauty. The air was cooler now, with a faint smell of smoke from some distant fireplace, a comforting aroma that announced the proximity of civilization. The wooden porch creaked gently under her feet, a familiar and welcoming sound. She could smell the lavender from the garden, mixed with the salty scent of the ocean, which was not far away, a sea breeze that brought with it the promise of tranquility. The front door was ajar, and the warm light from the living room invited her in, a safe haven. The click confirmed it was secure, a sound of completion. That day had been an ordeal, a test of her physical and mental strength, a journey through fear. She had faced her fears, defied what seemed inevitable, and emerged victorious. A day to be remembered, a day when she had truly proven that she was stronger than fate, that she was the mistress of her own path. Lavra stepped back, watching the bicycle hanging, a silent trophy of her personal victory, a symbol of her resilience. Laura knelt down, petting the dog, feeling the familiarity and comfort of her home, the warmth of unconditional love. The scent of jasmine from the bouquet Mark had bought filled the room, a sweet and relaxing aroma. She closed her eyes for a moment, absorbing the peace of the moment, the feeling of being finally safe in her sanctuary. She smiled, a genuine smile of relief that she hadn't felt since morning, a smile that lit up her tired face. The air seemed lighter, the tension in her shoulders eased, as if an invisible weight had been removed. A feeling of victory, bittersweet and exhausting, filled her. She had survived. Her husband, Mark, a skilled carpenter with strong hands and a gentle heart, had insisted on installing the mount so she could store her bicycle safely and avoid scratches. The mount, made of solid oak wood and robust screws, seemed unshakable, a fortress for her precious bicycle. Laura had always trusted Mark's skill, his attention to detail, his care. She had cheated fate, or so it seemed, a thought that made her smile, despite the ache in her muscles. The final descent to the city of Eureka, where her home was a breeze, a welcome relief after the day's tension. She allowed herself to relax a little, feeling the wind on her face, the soft sound of the tires on the smooth asphalt, a melody of freedom. The city lit up as darkness fell, the lights of the houses twinkling like stars on earth, a warm invitation. The smell of home-cooked food, coming from open windows, was a comforting invitation, a promise of rest and nourishment. Laura felt her body aching, but a deep satisfaction washed over her, a sense of accomplishment. She had fought against her premonition and won, or so she believed. Arriving at her home, a modest craftsman-style house with a small, well-tended garden, Laura dismounted her bicycle with a sigh of relief, her legs wobbly. She pushed the bicycle to the side of the house, where a newly installed wall mount waited to store it. Finally home, she murmured to the empty air, her voice hoarse with exhaustion, but with a tone of relief. With a last effort, she lifted the bicycle and fitted it into the mount. She walked towards the front door, her exhausted body craving a hot bath and a good meal, a well-deserved rest. Upon entering the house, she heard the joyful barking of her golden retriever, Max, who ran to greet her, his tail wagging frantically.